The first step is to identify the product that you want to build your sales message around. In the smart sales system, we use the word product a lot. We'll say, talk about your product here, or what is your product, and whatnot. And when we refer to product, what we're talking about here is what you're ultimately trying to sell the prospect. And that could be a physical product, a widget, a device, a piece of software, a car, but it could also be a service. In fact, a common question we get asked is, does the smart sales system and sales scripter work for if you sell a service? And it definitely does. Instead of always saying product or service, we just always say product. But when we say product, we're basically asking, insert your product or service. In fact, the smart sales methodology might actually work better when selling a service, because a service is sometimes something it's not tangible. It's something you don't see or feel like you do a product. So sometimes it can be hard to sell a service, and the smart sales system actually fits really well in that particular area. But this could also apply to, a grouping of products or services, or it could also be a feature, or you could also be just trying to sell an event. Like you could be launching a campaign to try to drive attendance to an event, or it's a particular event in your sales cycle that you're trying to sell, like a needs assessment or something. So you might see that, and you might immediately know what product you need to build your sales message around, or it might make sense for you to basically have your sales message built around all the different products you sell. But what I would recommend you do is, it can be good to make a list of the different things you sell, just to make sure you're not missing anything. But you could start by brainstorming the products and services that you sell. And just for demonstration purposes here, I'm going to go back to that same example that we left off on the last week, where I used an example of a salesperson selling gym memberships to a health and fitness club. So if I were that salesperson, I was going through this process, here are some things I might list out in terms of what I sell: gym membership, personal training, vitamins, supplements, nutrition, consulting. The next step is, maybe it might make sense for you to brainstorm some of the different features that are included in the products you sell. So for the gym salesperson, that might be free weights, treadmills, classes. The next step is, you might want to brainstorm different groupings of your products or services. You might try to think of a way to kind of bundle everything together. So it's almost like an everything that you sell, if there's something that you can refer to that, referring to like your portfolio of products or services. So for the gym membership example, that might be is a health and fitness club, but they also have these other packages, and might be worth listing those out. Once you go through that exercise, you can then look at everything you sell, and the next step is just to pick, okay, what does it make sense for me to build your first sales message around? Ultimately, if you're really using the smart sales system correctly, you're ultimately going to have more than one sales message. And definitely for your first message, you should look at your list that you brainstormed and say, okay, it makes sense to build a sales message around this particular product or bundle of products. After you've picked the product that you want to build your sales message around, I want you to stop and try to think about your differentiation. And this is how your product differs from your competition. For example, is your product easier to use, better quality, lasts longer, looks better, is cheaper? I want you to try to think of 2 to 3 ways if possible. Now, for some salespeople, this will be pretty easy. Maybe just real quickly, that your system can be up and running quicker or without consulting services, or your system has a video option and the other systems don't, or your system has more languages. You probably know this right at the top of your mind. Get it down in your notes, and so you can put it into your sales message. Although I will point out, for some salespeople, this will be a difficult step, especially if you sell something that's a very me too type of service. For example, if you're a recruiter, or if you sell insurance, or if you're an accountant, it can be very difficult to think, well, I provide a service that a lot of people need, and I have a lot of very happy customers, but I do the same thing as a lot of people that I compete against. That's very understandable. If that's the case, you may need to think out of the box in terms of not how your actual product or service is different, but is there something different about doing business with you? It could be your price. It could be the way you structure your contracts. It could be your customer service. For example, maybe your product is exactly the same, but when your customers call the support line, they actually talk to a human. That's a big differentiation. In today's day and age, sometimes it's just difficult to get a human on the phone. Well, your product could be exactly the same, but that's definitely differentiation, and it's definitely something you should have in your sales message. Although, if it's the case, your product is a Me Too product, you really don't differ in any sort of way, no problem at all. You can skip this step and still have a great sales message. The last step on creating sort of your product and company details is to think about any company bragging points. I personally don't want you talking too much about the company you work for. I want you focusing more on your prospect. But at the end of the day, if you have some really impressive details about your company, we want to get that in your sales message at certain times. So for example, if you've been in business a long time, 30 years, if you have a ton of customers, if you're a very large company, if you're international and operate in different countries, if you won certain awards, if you have certain accomplishments, patents on file, if you have some sort of financial strength, certain ownership details, sometimes it's good to mention that you're a woman-owned business or a veteran-owned business. So these are just some examples of interesting things, maybe impressive things about your company. And if you have any of these, it's not going to make or break you, but it's definitely stuff that you might want to mention at particular times in your sales message and in your script. The next step is to identify the target that you're creating a sales message for. And I just want to point out, we're going to dig pretty deep into the subject of targeting your sales message to different people. For your first sales message, this can be a very simple step, and you might even skip this whole step altogether, because if you're creating your first sales message, it might be a very broad message that you're targeting towards everybody. For example, your target could be businesses or small businesses or retirees or individuals. So I'm going to talk to you more about how having very focused sales messages, but when you're just getting going, you can just use a broad target and actually skip this chapter and skip this step. The logic here is either you can use some of this targeting with your first sales message, or just listen to it right now and then come back to this for your next message or two. So the logic here is to create a buyer persona focused sales message. And what that means is, when you have a product selling message, all you're doing is talking about the product that you sell in the company you work for primarily. And with that, you can use the same message for different buyers. Right? It doesn't really matter the industry you're talking to, because primarily you're just talking about your product, so you can kind of say the same thing. When you have a consultative selling sales message that focuses more on benefits and problems and asking good questions, all those individual points and things you should say could change when you change the buyer type and the target buyer that you're going after, and you'll see that as we start to move forward in this process. But basically, what we can do is, when we select a very specific target buyer for the sales message that we're creating, we can create a message that's targeted to that particular individual. And this allows us to tailor the message to their interests and to their problems and to questions that make most sense to them. And this is where you literally start speaking the buyer's language. If you've ever had some sales managers tell you to speak the customer's language and you'll be able to sell more, that makes sense, but it's often difficult to do. This is how it can be easy to do that, because when you start to create a sales message, not only that's focused on their interests and their hot buttons, but also you can incorporate industry acronyms or industry events or industry related language. And like I said, you actually begin speaking their language. This could be the difference that sets you apart from the competition when you're making cold calls or sending emails, and could be the difference between you getting shot down or getting ignored and you getting your foot into that account. Now, the first step in maybe creating buyer persona targeted sales messages is to think about what target buyers are you going after, and are you coming in contact with. And in order to do that, I recommend a step of brainstorming some of the buyer types that you should start to think about. So I'm going to go through some categories here. You don't need to memorize these or write all this down, but this is to give you some ideas of different target buyer types that you could go after. So like I said, for your first sales message, you might want to just use very broad buyer types that you can kind of use and create a very broad message that you can use for everybody, and that way you can start adopting the system with one message and keeping it kind of simple right out of the gate. So you could use just sort of businesses, small businesses, business owners, executives for your target buyer type. You might want to think about the different size of organizations that you're going after. Are you going after very large corporations or small businesses? You could sell the exact same product to large corporations and small businesses, but when you change that buyer type, your message might change. What you say to a small business owner could be very different from what you say to a large corporation or maybe a procurement department of a large corporation. You might want to think about the different industries that you sell into: construction, retail, healthcare, education. When you're calling and prospecting into organizations, you likely could sell into different departments. Sure, you could use the same message and probably get by and be successful, but you can reach a higher level of performance by having a different sales message when talking to those different audiences. You might want to think about the different titles of people that you're trying to reach in terms of the different levels of the organization. Are you calling into the C-level, VP level, manager level, director? Typically, when you move up the organization, the interests slightly change. The prospect becomes more big picture focused, less technical. When you're talking lower in an organization, you can focus more on the technical details. With that, you might end up benefiting from having a different message when talking to those different people. This one's a little bonus or a little extra step, but you could also have a different sales message for different sales stage prospects. For example, when you're talking to cold prospects that you haven't engaged with at all versus talking to past customers or even current customers that you're trying to cross-sell, those could be totally different messages, different emails, different call scripts, and you might benefit from thinking about who are the different people that you're going after and preparing for those. That might be overwhelming, and like I said, don't worry about that too much. That's just to kind of get your thoughts going. But for your planning long term, you can use any brainstorming you do on the different departments, different industries that you might go after. Make those notes, and then you can create a tool that I call your campaign coordinates. And you end up with a tool that looks like this. Now, the column going up and down vertically on the left side, that's your brainstorming that you did with the different things that you sell. And this is where your notes come into play here from the previous chapter. Then across the x-axis, across the header row across the top, are the different buyer types that you want to go after. And this creates a matrix. It's similar to longitude, latitude lines on a map, where there's intersections between the products you sell and the different people that you're going after, the different audiences that you're going after. Where those intersect, that could be a sales message that you could create or a campaign that you could create. And if you look at this, just from the brainstorming I've done right here, there's a lot of different combinations. You by no means would want to create all of those. You want to look for, okay, what do I need to just hit the ground running? So that might be the sort of the everything product, maybe targeting businesses or small businesses. And then you just create that as your first message and maybe put a check mark in that intersection. And so this would be your a planning tool to create your sales strategy around and your sales messaging campaigns that you want to create over a period of time. Now, just to give you an anecdote of how this could help you, we can go back to the concept of coordinates and longitude, latitude, because think if you and I were to take a road trip and we wanted to drive across the country or the state and see some really interesting things. Well, if we just get in our car and try to drive and see what comes along our way, then we decrease our odds of our goal of successfully seeing some different interesting sites. But if we plan out the coordinates and the destinations of the different things we want to see, we greatly increase our odds of hitting our goal of seeing interesting stuff. Well, it's kind of the same thing with your sales strategy, in that your goal is to sell certain products and to hit your targets and to increase your revenue. And if you just have that very broad goal and you just go out and you try to talk to every prospect that you can come in contact with and talk about whatever product it seems to make sense talking about at that particular time, that's the equivalent of just driving around hoping to see some interesting stuff, which you may have some success, but your odds of success are lower than they would be if you had a plan. And so this is where you can start to build your plan for your sales strategy of what you want to sell and who you want to go after. And just in the same way that plotting out your coordinates on a map can increase your chances of having a successful road trip, this can increase your chances of having a successful sales strategy. Now, there's a very good chance that you just heard all of that and it might be overwhelming, especially with all of this being new to you. And my advice to you is we definitely believe in a crawl, walk, run approach. And so don't let that overwhelm you. Our hope would be that you just did some brainstorming and at least made some notes and have some juices flowing in your head. But you don't really need to take all of that action and build all of that right now, because the crawl step is just to build one sales message. And like I said, in most situations, this would be a broad message that probably is for all of your products and targeting a large segment of the market, such as businesses, and create a broad sales message and just use that. Once you're ready to go from crawling to walking, you can come back to this process and come back to your brainstorming, and you can create additional sales messages that you can start to use and add in once you've sort of begun to adopt this smart sales system. The additional messages that you might want to create for your walk phase might be individual sales messages for different products that you sell. And once you're ready to go to the next level and you're ready to run, you could come back to this process, and this is where you might create different sales messages for the different types of buyers. So this is where you might want to create a finance department sales message or a manufacturing industry sales message. The next step is to identify the value that the product or service offers that you've selected for your sales message. And when we say value, value can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but just to simplify it, when we refer to the word value, we're referring to the benefits or improvements that your product can deliver to the particular buyer, customer that you're selling it to. So when you sell something, what do they stand to improve by consuming what you sell? And all we're really trying to do at this step is identify a minimum of 3 benefits, 3 improvements that your product offers. We do break down the concept of value into 3 levels to help you to make sure you're thinking about all the different ways that your product or service can help. And this is kind of designed more for B2B selling, but it can also work a little bit for B2C. But level 1 in the 3 levels of value is technical value. And this is where your product or service can help to improve something as processes or the systems or the people. And so some examples of technical value or technical improvements or technical benefits is that you help to automate manual tasks, make something work better, decrease the amount of time or effort it took to do something. Your product or service made something easier to do, increased visibility and access to information, improved communications, and so on. And when your product delivers technical value or technical improvements, those typically work their way up to create business value or business improvements. And those can be seen in the area of improving revenue, improving costs, decreasing costs, improving the delivery of services. And so some examples of that are improved revenue, market share, close rate, conversion rate, profitability, decreased costs, decreased risk, improved decision making, improved product delivery time, product quality, customer satisfaction. And when your product helps your customer to realize or see business improvements, those will often work their way up to deliver personal value to the person who's purchased your product. Say you sell your services to a VP of HR, when their department realizes technical improvements and business improvements, that can often impact that buyer at a personal level by increasing their income, improving their career, improving their workload. And with examples of increasing personal income such as bonuses and commissions, if you decrease costs for a VP, That might help them to hit their annual bonus more consistently, decrease personal expenses, create opportunities for career advancement, recognition, decrease workload, decrease stress. So you don't have to remember all of that, but those are some of the different types of value that you can deliver. Now, I will say, if you look at those 3 levels and you're starting to get overwhelmed, don't make this more complicated than it needs to be. And we can keep it simple. Remember that our goal here is just to think of a few benefits that your service delivers or your product delivers. 3 at a minimum, 10 at most. If you want to break them down into technical and business and personal, that's great. The good thing about those 3 levels is that having those 3 levels or those 3 categories will help you to not forget about a particular type of benefit that you might be offering, or it might help you to think of new stuff that you weren't thinking of before. For example, there's some salespeople that only talk about the technical stuff, and those 3 levels can help them to go that extra step and think about the business improvements. There are other salespeople that only talk about the business improvements and forget about really what gets them there, and it's all the technical stuff. And the personal stuff can be easy to forget also. And I just want to point out the personal benefits are often not stuff you want to lead with when you have a cold prospect. That's really good stuff once you've established rapport and when you're engaged and you're at the table and you're really trying to close the deal or build interest. Focusing on those personal improvements can be very powerful. So I want to take you through a process here that you can use to brainstorm and think about your benefits, your improvements, the value that your service delivers. So I'm going to take you through a couple steps here. And the first step is, well, we've already done this. We've already thought about the product that you want to create a message for. And I'm going to use that gym membership salesperson for this demonstration. But the product is a health and fitness club. Here are some features that are part of that product. The next step is we need to identify the target buyer for the sales message. Well, we're building this sales message in this example for individuals that are looking to get healthier. And the next step is to think about when that particular buyer consumes or uses the product that we're creating a sales message for, what are some potential improvements that they can see? Now, this is a little different than just thinking about the product and just saying what are some benefits. We're keeping in mind the particular buyer for this message. So we come up with, if our buyer is someone looking to get healthier, so this might be someone that's overweight or doesn't work out regularly and they're not healthy, then some improvements that they can realize is we might help them to become healthier, decrease stress, feel better, become more confident, improve personal relationships, decrease medical costs, transform their life. So really powerful stuff there. And it's this process that led us to thinking about those things that we might not have thought about. And by the way, if we were the product selling salesperson, we might not even talk about or think, not only not think about, but not talk about this stuff with our buyer. We might be talking about the health and fitness club and the weights. So this really pushes us to that next level. Then what I also want to point out while you're looking at this, just think if we change the target buyer type to somebody else. There's different buyers that you can sell this product to. Let's say we change from someone that's looking to get healthier and we change it to someone who works out every day already and we need to sell to them. Well, the benefits that we have over there aren't really applicable when we change to that. We change the buyer type to say a gym rat. If we're trying to sell to a gym rat that changes from one gym to another, the improvements are different. Maybe the improvements are a 24-hour access to facility, cleaner facility, better personal training, get to the next level. So you can see the benefits change. Here's another example. What if we change from selling to individuals to selling the health and fitness club to businesses to offer as a benefit to their employees? Then the improvements totally change to something completely different. They change to helping small businesses to have a competitive benefits package, helping to improve recruitment of new employees, helping to improve retention, decrease turnover. Totally different benefits. So as you can see, while the product stays the same always, when we change the buyer type, the benefits and improvements change. And this is how we end up with different sales messages that are focused on the different buyer personas that we're engaging with. And this is how you get to that next level. Now, you may go through that and you may be able to think of your 3 or 4 or 5 different benefits and build your sales message, and that's great. If you have trouble with that, or if you want more help brainstorming, here are some questions that you can ask yourself. And so there's questions for each level of value. So here's some technical value brainstorming questions. I'm not going to read through all of these. You can copy these down from the recording or get the slides. But here are questions you can ask yourself to think of different ways that your product can help from a technical standpoint. Here are some questions you can ask yourself to think of business improvements that your product might deliver. And here are some questions you can ask to think about different ways that your product might help the buyer at a personal level. Now, the next step is to think about the pain that your product helps your prospect to resolve, minimize, or avoid. And pain is basically when something's not working well or could be working better for your buyer. And by being able to identify the pain that you can help to resolve, you can get that into your sales message, and that can help you to communicate better, build interest. It can help you to identify when someone needs what you sell, so it can help you with qualifying as well. And I just want to point out, the SMART sales system isn't the first sales training methodology to talk about benefits and pain points. In fact, one of the first really powerful sales training programs I went through talked a lot about pain points. And I think that they have an awesome sales training program. But one of the weaknesses that I felt that they have is that after the training program, I was all about finding pain. But when I got back to my desk, I didn't know what pain to look for, and I didn't know how to get pain into the conversation when I was picking up the phone and calling prospects. I knew that pain was important, but I didn't know what pain to focus on. I sold a bunch of different products, and that training company they taught me the importance of looking for pain, but they didn't tell me what pain to look for. Well, we take that to the next level. So if you follow this process, you're going to actually walk away with this knowing exactly what pain to look for and what questions to ask to find it. Figuring out what pain to look for, we actually break pain down into the same levels as we break value down, because they're somewhat inversely aligned. And so just like there's technical value, there's technical pain. And these are challenges or issues that your prospect can experience in terms of processes not working well, or systems, or people. And so some examples are tasks are manual, time consuming, things aren't working well, processes are difficult, connectivity, communicating is difficult, performance isn't good. And so when your prospect experiences some of the technical challenges, that can often work its way up and cause business pain in the area of revenue or costs or services. And so basically, if something's manual or time consuming, that's going to cost more money in terms of labor or downtime or whatever. And so you can have difficulty, finding ways to decrease revenue, costs are high, conversion rates are low, decision making is difficult. And when your prospect has either technical pain or business pain, that can cause them personal pain. So if you're selling to an executive or a VP or a manager, these pains impact them from an income perspective, a career perspective, work environment. Maybe they're not hitting their bonus because their costs are high and they can't get their costs down. Maybe they're not getting promoted because they're not getting any recognition or not having good performance because of all of these problems that are happening. Maybe they have to work long hours because things are not working well. It's good to know what pain your product can help make go away. It's not really that great to know what pain your prospect is experiencing overall. Like, I think one of the worst questions that some people think is a good sales question is what keeps you up at night. Because what keeps a prospect up at night, while that's important to them, if it has nothing to do with an area that you can help with, it doesn't help you at all. So finding the pains that you can help make go away are really important, and then you can look for those when you're talking to prospects. You may look at those different levels and be thinking right now about, oh yeah, I know these different pain points that we help with. That's great. Put that down in your notes, but put it to the side, because this process that we're taking you through will help you to brainstorm pain points in another way. And so if I pick up where we left off, when we brainstormed and thought of your benefits, we can take that one step further to think about pain points, because your pain and your value are inversely related, meaning when you improve something, you're making something else not as bad. So meaning if you make this better, then this, what is uncomfortable or not good, goes away. So often you can look at the benefits that your product delivers, and that can help give you ideas for problems that you can help make go away. So if we go back to that same example of a health and fitness club, and these are the benefits we came up with, we can basically go line by line and look at each one and think, well, what is the opposite of that? What is a problem that benefit will make go away? Or what is a problem that would be there that someone would want the benefit that I have to offer? So basically we can look at that list and then come up with a corresponding, it's actually an inversely correlated list of problems. So you help someone to become healthier. Well, the problem is that they're not as healthy as they need to be or should be. You decrease stress. Someone might have a lot of stress in their daily life. You help someone to feel better. They don't feel well overall. You help someone to become more confident. They don't have self-confidence, and so on. So all of these rows here, these points are the opposite of one another. So you can basically use what you came up with on the previous step to help you to create what you have here. And remember, the list of benefits is derived from the target buyer that we were working from. So these pain points, if we continue in this manner, these pain points should all still be connected and associated with the target buyer for our sales message. So we're still going in a direction of a very laser-focused sales message. And going back again, if we change that target buyer type, these pain points would be different. If we change that to a gym rat, they have different pain points. And knowing the different pain points of the different buyers you're prospecting to will greatly improve your ability to communicate effectively. The next step is to come up with good questions to ask that help us to find out if the prospect has the pain points that we can help to resolve, minimize, or avoid. And we refer to these as pain questions. So these are just basically soft, probing questions that we can ask on a call or in a first conversation with someone or at the early part of an appointment that generally check in to see how is the prospect doing in the area that I can fix problems. This is the equivalent of a doctor talking to a patient and poking them in the stomach, saying, does it hurt when I press here? Or checking someone's temperature, or looking in their ear or in their eyes when they're looking for the general symptoms. They're not running an MRI or doing a deep test. They're just doing a general probe to see what's going on. And we call these pain questions. I'm going to help you to have some ideas of how to develop good pain questions to ask. But before we talk about creating your pain questions, I want to talk about a couple challenges you have with asking these questions and with finding pain. And it's important to know this, to know that it can be challenging to compose the right question or to know what you're dealing with when you ask the questions that we're going to help you to create. And the first thing that you need to be aware of is what I would call latent pain. And this is where your prospect thinks that everything is okay and that they don't have pain because they're completely unaware of it. They genuinely think everything is okay and that they don't have any pain, but they really do. Let me give you an example. So let's say that you had a leak in your gas tank. It was a minor leak, but every day you're leaking gas all over the road when you drive your car. And your car's operating normal. It doesn't break down. It's not a huge leak, so you're just going to fill up maybe about 10, 15, 20% earlier than you would because of the leak, but you don't really notice that. So if I were to ask you, do you have a leak in your gas tank or do you have anything wrong with your car? You would tell me, no, everything's great. Car's running great. And that is what latent pain is. You have pain, you have a problem, you're just completely unaware of it. And that can often be the case. And that's not something to be overly concerned about, but it's important to know because you can design your questions to minimize that, and you can improve the way you ask questions and respond to questions to be more prepared for that. And we're going to talk about that throughout this sales training program. The next challenge that you need to be prepared for is a state of denial. So this is where the prospect, they might know that things aren't perfect, or they may know that there is a problem, but you're a salesperson and they're trying to get rid of you. So they're gonna, if you ask them and strike a chord on something that's not working well, they may say that everything's okay because they're in maybe a conscious state of denial, and they're saying this, they're denying that they have pain just to kind of get rid of you so they can get back to work. An example of this might be an athlete who gets hurt in a game and they feel pain, but when the coach says, "How are you doing?" they say, I'm fine, because they want to get back in the game. And your prospect can do this exact same thing because they're trying to get back in the game, which back in the game is basically off the phone with you and back to work. So these are just two things you just need to be prepared for and be aware of when you're both creating your pain questions and when you're asking your questions and talking to prospects. So let's talk about creating these pain questions. I mean, it's one thing to say you should ask questions that look for pain. Like I've mentioned before, it's one thing to know that you should look for pain, but that can be hard to find if you don't know what to ask. And it can be hard to know what questions to ask. So we can actually take this process here that we've been going through and go to the next step, and it can help us to figure out what questions to ask. So where we left off, the last step, we brainstormed pain points as an inversely correlated brainstorming exercise from the benefits that our product delivers. We can take that one step further to then think about, okay, well, what questions should we ask for each pain point? If each of these is a pain point that your service or product helps to make go away or fix, then for each pain point, there's one or two questions that you could ask to see if your prospect has or is concerned about that pain point. So if we go through these pain points, here are just some examples of questions I came up with. So how important is it for you to lose weight, get in better shape? How much of a priority is it for you to get healthier, have a healthier lifestyle? How do you feel about your level of self-confidence? On a scale from 1 to 10, how stressful are you? So I'm not going to say these are perfect questions, but I arrived at these questions by looking at my pain point. So it's a great guide that can lead you to what questions you should ask. And once you have these pain questions, these are great questions for a cold call, for a networking event, for a first appointment. You can do all sorts of stuff with these questions, and if you design them right, they shouldn't be too invasive, they shouldn't be too time-consuming, and they should do a really good job of figuring out what's going on with the prospect and if they need what you sell. Now, we can all agree on that logic with how to get there and how to derive these from the pain points, but it still can be hard to compose good questions. So I'm going to go through a few things for you to keep in mind with composing your questions. So these are just tips for writing good pain questions. So try to use open-ended questions. Now it can be real easy to just look at the pain point and stick a "do you have" in front of the pain point to come up with a question, and that's actually extremely easy to do. And here's an example of doing that. So let's say the pain point is trouble sleeping at night. You could easily stick a "do you have" in front of that to come up with, do you have trouble sleeping at night? And you know what? That looks like a decent question to ask based on the service that you sell if you help to make someone sleep better at night. The problem with that question is that it can be easily answered with a yes or no, and that minimizes the engagement that you're able to create because the prospect can just say no, or even if they say yes, it's more difficult to keep the conversation going. It decreases the amount of information you're able to extract from that question. So try to compose your questions to be open-ended where they can't be answered with a yes or no. The next thing is I like to look at the pain points that you help to resolve and start out with a feeling question. How do you feel? Or how concerned are you? So instead of just asking, do you have this? Like, do you have a leak in your gas tank, or is your car not running correctly? I like to soften it, make it more broad by asking about feelings. And so some examples of that is, How do you feel about the amount of time it takes to train new salespeople? How concerned are you about the amount of time it takes to train new salespeople? How happy are you with the amount of time it takes to train new salespeople? So if I was more, that's the same pain point there for all three of those questions. But if I was more direct, I might say, does it take you a long time to train new salespeople? Do you need to decrease the amount of time it takes to train new salespeople? Which I can easily get a no, we're fine, we're fine. But if you make it more broad and soften it and get it more tied to their feelings, you can get more information or more likely to start a conversation. The next one thing that I like to do is use questions to ask how important is it for the prospect. This is really good if your pain point is something that you know that they have. For example, if you sell a service that helps a business to get more traffic to their store, to their website, you know that just about every business wants more traffic, right? So if you were to say, do you need more website traffic or more foot traffic? That's a less than optimum question to ask because you know that everybody needs it. What I like to do is identify where does that concern rank on the things that are important to them. So if you know that they want more traffic to their website, what can be valuable to you is to find out where that is on the things that are important to them. Here's an example of how you could phrase that. How much of a priority is it for you to find new ways to increase your website traffic? How important is it for you to find new ways to increase your website traffic? So two ways to ask that question where instead of just asking, do you need more traffic, you're trying to figure out where it is in terms of their priority or level of importance. When was the last time you did this question? So how often have you experienced errors in your invoices? When was the last time you analyzed your invoices? How often do you reconcile your vendor invoices? So basically looking to the past to find out what's going on this is good instead of asking what's going on today, because you may be looking for a pain point, but instead of trying to find out if that pain point is being experienced right now, you can make it more broad to just try to identify, has it happened in the past or has it ever happened, which increases your odds of hitting something there, because if you're very specific with, is this going on right now, you decrease the size of the target you're trying to hit and you increase the odds of getting a no or we're fine. The last thing is I would recommend that you be caution on the side of being too invasive, especially if you're asking these questions in a cold call where you're talking to someone for the first time. For example, your product may solve the pain point of getting fined or having compliance issues in a particular area, which is very important and something that people care about. And you may see that pain point and think, oh, I need to ask something about if they're currently getting fined or if they're currently out of compliance. And on paper, that looks good, but that's a bit invasive. And you need to be cautious that if someone's talking to you for the first time, that might not be the thing that you want to ask about or talk about. So some ways to soften that a bit is instead of saying, are you currently compliant? How do you feel about your ability to meet all the different compliance requirements? So you're using a feeling question there. How do you feel about? How concerned are you about getting fined for compliance issues? Using the other tactic of importance. How important is it for you to improve compliance? How much of a priority is it? So using some of the previous tips there to decrease the level of invasiveness. The next step is to create what we call a name drop example. And basically, this is sharing an example of a past or current customer that you've helped in some way or another by selling your product or service. And you can, once you create that example, you can then use that in your sales message and in your scripts to explain how you can help. You can use it to build interest. You can use it to establish credibility. And it's fairly easy to create a name drop using the structure that we use. So all you basically have to do is answer 4 simple questions. Question 1 is identify the name of a previous or current customer that you want to share as an example. And if you identify a customer but you're not sure whether you should use their name or have the approval to use their name, you could describe them. So instead of if one of your name drops is a dentist, you could say, and we worked with a dentist in this particular area, as opposed to saying the actual name of the dentist. So you could just describe the customer as well. Then step 2 is identify the product or service that you sold them. This should be pretty easy. It could be the exact same product or service that you chose to create for the sales message that you're creating. Identify the initial or technical improvement that your service or product delivered to them. And then the 4th step is to identify the ultimate or business improvement that you deliver. So if we go back to the same process that we're continuing to build on to create your message, the next step is to come up with a name drop. So if we go back, one thing that we can use all of the stuff that we've already brainstormed to help us with this. We can use the product we came up with. We can use the target buyer type to think of who the name drop should be. You can then look towards the value that you brainstormed on the earlier step, and ideally some of these benefits is what probably was delivered to that particular customer. So you want to look at these to maybe get ideas. You could just copy a couple of them, or you might want to modify one of them to make it exactly how you help that particular customer. And you could use one of these for the initial improvement and one of these benefits for the ultimate improvement. So to see what that looks like, if just using the same example that we've been kind of working off of, which is the health and fitness club, we could use an example to identify, basically, we worked with a 35-year-old man that was about 35 pounds overweight. We provided him with a membership, personal trainer, and nutrition consulting. So that's the product and service that we delivered. And then the initial improvement is this helped him to successfully adopt a workout routine and healthier diet. So that's basically the process that we helped to improve. And then the ultimate improvement is after only 6 months, he lost 30 pounds and felt better both physically and mentally. This helped him to not only improve his performance at work, he also ended up finding a new romantic relationship. So that's a name drop example that we created by going through those 4 steps, and we can use that when talking with prospects. Imagine trying to close a deal and someone doesn't know that if they want to spend the money, and you share that example with them. So it's a very powerful way to build interest, close a deal, create credibility, and whatnot. So that's pretty much it. We basically just we went through the process that you can go through to create your sales message